We're here with Billy Bright from Wood and Wire, and when I say here with, I mean virtually by Zoom. Did the same thing yesterday talking to Larry Keel, and I have to point out, no, we're not actually here, we're virtually here. And, you know, the band has a new album out, no matter where it goes from here. So, Billy, thank you for coming on and talk to us. And before we get started, we want to give a little plug to our sponsor, Danny Balfour and Funky Dyes. Our background is a Funky Dyes tapestry, and the mask I'm wearing is one of Danny's creations. You can check them out on Facebook at Funky Dyes. And also musicians, check out the really cool masks that he made for Railroad Earth. You'll find them in Railroad Earth's merch table in their online store. And contact Danny about having him produce some merch for your band as well. So Danny Balfour's Funky Dyes, thank you for your support. So Billy, are we here? You're down in where are you at, Billy? Austin?
I am. Well, we've always said that we're virtually here. We're basically here, but now it's more true than ever. I am down in between Austin and San Antonio, about an hour from each one, near a town called Wimberley. That's my official address, is Wimberley, Texas.
Oh, is that considered Texas Hill Country?
Yes, it is. It's kind of where the Texas Hill Country, it's the beginning of it. And as you moved westward, it continues. But definitely.
We hear a lot about the Texas Hill Country, the music scene there and the music scene in Austin. But we don't necessarily hear a lot about bluegrass in that area. How big a bluegrass scene is there? How's that fit into the Austin music scene? And
yeah, well, you know, size-wise, per capita, it's probably not extremely extremely large. I don't know what kind of 0.001% we're talking. As far as its presence here, it's definitely been a well-represented style in Texas since probably, you know, the 50s or 60s, definitely starting in the 70s. I know that for sure, just based on who I know that was here back then. But yeah, it's a thing that I've seen grow in the 20 years that I've been around here, or 25, I guess. It's something that I've seen grow as it relates to bluegrass, but we're definitely not an area that's renowned for bluegrass, although we've had a lot of good bluegrass acts to come out of here, and not the least of which is the one that, you know, drove the last nail in the coffin for me as far as bluegrass goes, which is the Bad Livers. And Danny Barnes is one of his first bands. And then we've had, well, Peter Rowan has a great relationship with Texas. When I first met him, he lived part-time in Texas. And then there's Alan Mundy and Slim Ritchie, and we've had the Sarah Giroux, the Green Cards, and South Austin Jug Band. We've had a good chunk of them. The what was that really cool band, Ross Holmes's band, kind of ahead of things, Cadillac Sky. They were a great bluegrass outfit out of Texas. But no, we're not known for it still. But we're working that scene down here with Wood and Wire.
I can take this off. I'm not around other people right now. I forgot to take it off after I finished the plug for Danny. Your bio for the band refers to Wood and Wire as bluegrass oriented, but it spends a lot of time discussing how you're not just a bluegrass band. So how would you classify your music? And do we spend too much time worrying about classifications that we should spend just enjoying the music?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say if it's too much time or anything. I don't think there's anything wrong with classifications. I think classifications are something that, especially people who don't play with music, it helps to communicate about music, you know? So there's nothing wrong with it, but it's kind of like music theory and music. It's like, it only explains what's happening naturally. We're definitely bluegrass tinged. I think part of the reason that's such a focus in our promotional materials is it just speaking to the fact that bluegrass is so much now, that we're a bluegrass band, I guess, visually by default based on the instrumentation that we have, but our music just sort of ties into that last question. Our music has a lot of other stuff going on with it in the way that we wrangle it, that's a little less bluegrassy. I guess we hear that at shows a lot at the merch table, like, I don't like bluegrass, but I like you guys, and so it's kind of we don't want to limit ourselves just to, bluegrass is one of those words that's very it's a very hot word for some people. That's like turn and run.
Also a word that there's a considerable crowd of traditionalists, or as I like to call them, the flat with two T's Earth Society, who
Right.
think that all bluegrass is limited to what Bill Monroe played or anything that sounds exactly like Bill Monroe.
Right.
Neglecting the fact that Bill Monroe himself was a damn progressive musician, and bluegrass really kind of emerged as a more progressive form of the country music of the time.
I completely agree. I mean, I like to I've had to sort of condense my thoughts a little bit by giving some interviews for this record over the release of it. So one of the things that um, keeps coming up in my explanations and discussions of things is exactly what you just said. Well, it doesn't keep coming, it keeps coming up from me. I'm glad to hear you say it, which is that bluegrass has been a progressive music since out of the gates. And so I um there's uh we want to be, inclusive to whoever wants to listen to us. And we've sort of also, based on what you were talking about earlier, we live in a sort of a bluegrass desert, in a sense. So for us, uh it's a line to walk, because in order to grow a crowd that goes beyond all your friends who play bluegrass, in order to grow, it's not like Virginia or North Carolina or Tennessee or a lot of those places that have really established roots of where you grow, roots with two O's and with an O and a U, both of those types. As far as if you start playing bluegrass out in Virginia, there's places to play for people who know what bluegrass is and love bluegrass. You just have to find your way into them. Out here, there's not really that as much. There's a few festivals that happen, over 3 days of the entire year. But there's not venues with big bluegrass audiences and events going on every weekend within an hour drive, multiple places, which is the case in a lot of other parts of the country, and not just the southeast and Pennsylvania and below and all that, but definitely there. That's something we don't have here. So we not only bring a lot of different influences to the band, but we have made our way, winning over a very eclectic, diverse group of listeners here in Texas, because they're not all they're most people have a tendency to see a banjo and run the other direction, like so but the what they call jam grass now, that all that stuff is definitely we kind of walk the line, not only with what we call it, but what we what we play musically. That's another reason that, we're sort of hesitant to argue whether it's bluegrass or not, or put some other kind of tag on it, because it's so many different things all coming together.
Andy Falco told me one time that that we were talking a little bit about some of the influences in the String Dusters music, and he said it's important to be genuine, and that those guys. He said he's a Jewish kid from Long Island. He didn't grow up in a cabin in the hollow. He can't write
Exactly.
songs about that.
Exactly. I mean, I started off playing in punk rock bands in El Paso, and then I got into rock and roll and psychedelic rock, which led me to the Grateful Dead, which led me to Garcia Grisman and the Aquarium Rescue Unit with Matt Mundy at the time, and then the Flecktones. And for me, that was that was it. I found the Bad Livers, and I was a goner. But to that point, it's like we none of us grew up in the holler either. So,
you mentioned the Dead, and I know that your bio talks about growing up with a Deadhead brother, and and Peter Rowan, who's one of your influences. When I talked to him one time, he made the point that more people these days come to bluegrass through the Dead, through Garcia and Grisman and Old in the Way, than through Bill Monroe. They discovered Bill Monroe after being exposed to it through those influences. Was that kind of the route you took?
Yeah. I was there a little bit before that. I got to kind of see the explosion, and then I was that's basically the route that I took. I was really early on. I mean, I remember that first Garcia Grisman record for me was like what I hear people talking about hearing the Beatles for the first time. It was I had found my way to the mandolin and that certain sound, and it kind of reminded me of um, a little bit of like Renaissance sounds and Appalachian music, although I didn't know I couldn't categorize, talk about categories. I couldn't categorize it in my head or figure out what the sound, because it wasn't something I listened to or heard other than on, some Zeppelin records and, nothing like David Grisman, as a featured instrument like that. And, yeah, I mean, absolutely. When I was already listening to the Aquarium Rescue Unit, but they were like back before they called it even jam bands. I mean, certainly nothing was called jam grass, but yeah, when that first Garcia Grisman record came on, and then I found my way into the more hardcore stuff. Definitely Olden in the Way. I mean, Olden in the Way was the super gateway to bluegrass for me, and it was. Yeah, it was an amazing thing to watch that. And Peter's, absolutely right. That's what they call the jam grass scene now is basically the scene that was created by those guys brought to bluegrass, you know, who Garcia brought to bluegrass or whatever, to be specific, I guess. Although I wouldn't give him sole credit, Oh, I gotta get a phone charger here. Let's take a walk.
So we'll get back into here. So Billy, you got the new album, and I understand you worked on it a little bit at a time. So this wasn't necessarily a COVID project. This was something that was ongoing. How long did you spend total putting songs together?
Oh gosh, well, as far as we did a lot of what they might call pre-production. We call it hanging out playing music. And we've been doing that for a couple years, developing some of this material, and playing a little bit of it live, and getting a feel for it. So in that sense, a couple years. But as far as the actual recording of it, we started in September and had about 15 or 16 songs we wanted to work on, and then from September through February, we recorded all those songs and then figured out what we liked working together and moved them through the mixing stage. And it was right about February 26th that we had our last mixing date, I believe. And then, a week and a half later, it was, just sort of downhill, down cliff from there. But yes, to answer your question, this was not a COVID project, other than the artwork and all the mastering and final mixing stuff that is part of the process. But that's stuff that we usually do through email anyway.
And the notes that I was given said that you had close to 2 albums worth of material that you pared down for this. Any plans to do anything with the other stuff, or was that just stuff that didn't make the cut?
Well, no plans to do anything with it yet. I mean, it's just stuff that it was all good stuff, but we did a bit of a voting process, to nothing really complicated, just everybody submits a list of the songs that they think work together as a collection. We have a little criteria, which is basically not going over 41 minutes, I think, because that's an ideal, or you don't want to go longer than that on an LP, otherwise you can start to lose some. So according to the mastering engineers powers that be recommendations, we use that as our timeline, and then we each submit a list of the songs that we think work together the best. And that's what a lot of it has to do with in the end, when you have a chunk of songs that you want, that are like you want on there, and then you have a big chunk of other songs to choose from, as far as pairing goes. So we all submitted our lists, and they were pretty much all the same. There was only a couple songs that we had to kind of wedge and work through and figure out which ones all work together. So yeah, that's how we did it.
Let's talk about those songs, and we'll go in the order they're on the album, and we'll start off with John. Now, Tony wrote that about a friend of his from high school. Tell us a little bit more about the song and about it musically.
1, 2, 3. Brown water brushes up against boulders on Galveston Island sits my buddy John. He's been in the shop fixing up furniture damaged by floods that have come and have gone. He's a modern day Kerouac and wannabe Banksy, silent and settled, victim of time. Now the cold winds are caught with the north on his mind. He'll be leaving this island for State 49. Seekers and searchers and drifters like me. Let it roll, let it ride, let it be.
John is an artist, but he goes up to Alaska and fishes salmon during the summer and makes enough money to fund his living and his art life down in Galveston during the year. And of course Tony dropped everything to pursue music at a certain point, and so that's what that song is about. And musically, instrumentation wise, it's kind of got it's definitely got a big Levon Helm influence in there, as far as the sort of the feel. It's like a 6/8 song or a 3/4 song, but it like got a cut time drum feel. Yeah, that's all I can think of on that one.
Can't keep up.
Can't keep up.
A love song.
Yeah.
A little bit of John Hartford feel.
Can't keep up. That was an easy. Yeah. Thank you, and I would agree. That's Trevor can do that. Yeah, it was a love song. I wrote that song. It was easy to write. It was about my wife. It was easy to write because it's all true. That one, lyrically, it is self-explanatory. Although it's kind of funny, and I'm glad we did mention that this was written and put out before COVID, because the last line of the song, "You are a festival, baby," is kind of, that meaning, the interpretation of that meaning has changed in recent times.
I can't keep up with you, baby. I can't keep up with you, baby. You got me running around like a chicken that's headed for gravy. I can't keep up with you, baby. I can't keep up with you, baby. But I keep on hanging around if you like it that way.
Fun song. I never actually ever intended for it to be on an album, but it ended up one of the songs that everyone decided we wanted to work on, and then we worked it up, and that's that one.
Pigs, a little bit of social commentary and kind of a song for our troubled times.
There's a gray-haired woman who's old and wise, been around and round a long damn time. Said things had changed since she was a girl. It's been hard to watch this mess unfurl. We hang our hats on reality stars. Look how cool and rich they are. Said be like them and you'll go far, but fickle fools we are. Dig a hole in the meadow, dig a hole in the cocoa ground. From the dust we ride and in the dust we lie, going round and round. Dig a hole in the meadow, dig a hole in the cold hard plain. Pigs don't fly, we all gonna die, and you can't take your money to the grave.
Yeah. Definitely social commentary, and that's one that Tony and Silas Slow, a friend of ours who used to be an Austin songwriter, moved to Nashville in recent years, but that song, definitely a social commentary. I mean, it's
You break out the mandola on that, and on the next song as well, Roadie Circle. Talk a little bit about the difference between the sound and the feel that gives you from the mandolin.
Oh yeah, well, it's lower in pitch, so it's the same relationship as violin to viola. So the low string on a mandolin is a G, and the low string on the mandola is the C below it. I usually choose the mandola. Like, the reason I chose it on this song is a classic reason for. This is a perfect example of how you choose the difference between a viola or a violin or a cello or whatever. Is that the part that I wanted to play for the key that it was being sung in, the part that I'd wanted to play, I couldn't get it as the low lick on the mandolin. I couldn't. If I did that on the mandolin, I'd have to do it up really high. Pitched, and I wanted to play it down in that gritty, meaty area, and be able to hit the bottom part of that riff as a low note, not a high note. That's really the reason I chose the mandola on that song. That being said, it does have a different And that's actually the reason I chose it on Roadie Circles as well, because the way the melody works out on the instrument, there's this cool range you can play it in on the mandola, but not on the mandolin. And so I guess the instrument just spoke to the song. But there is, when you get into playing the mandola versus the mandolin, because it has a lower timbre, it's like or a lower range, it's got a different vibe to it, and a different effect. The mandola is closer to the guitar insofar as the way it sounds and the way you might strum it or cross pick it, or it doesn't work as good for what we typically think of in the mandolin chop, that chuck chuck chuck. But both those songs, it was just necessary because of for me to play melodically what I wanted to play, it was necessary to use those instruments for those songs. And on Pigs, rhythmically, it was fine. On Roadie Circles, it was good too. I just found a way to do a sort of strummy chop that worked in that key. So.
And Roadie Circles, which we should mention, is named after a dog named Roadie, not the band's Roadies, but Peter Rowan appearing on it too. And tell a little bit about how that came to be. And I understand it was partly because it just kind of sounded Peter Rowan-ish when it was played.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we call that dog music, D-O-G. And because it is about Trevor's border collie, well, it was, I guess not about, it was named for Trevor's border collie, Roadie, who liked to pace in circles around the room as we play music, sort of nervously pacing. And Roadie passed away a couple years ago when we were working out that song, and so he wrote that as a tribute to Roadie. And then, yes, Peter, when I was playing these mixes for my wife, she said, without my prompting, and I feel like Trevor had mentioned this before in the studio too. It had been kind of like, hey, this is kind of got a Rowan-y vibe or something on it. And when I played it for my wife, the mixes, and she heard it without my even mentioning what Trevor had said or Rowan at all, she said, "Oh, I could hear Rowan on this." I couldn't. So a few weeks later, this was during the hard lockdown and crazy times of the quarantine last spring. I just had a wild hair to reach out to Peter, and I did, and just happened to be able to work that out at the last minute to have him introduce the song, so to speak. So it was fun. It was really just, more than anything, just a fun reconnecting.
Jeff Union wrote the next song, Spirit of 94, which, really a great tale, a historical tale about the Whiskey Rebellion. And I know there's a story behind how you guys came to be performing it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, do you know Jeff? I
know of Jeff. I don't know him.
Yeah. He's great. I haven't seen his latest Ragged Union, but Jeff is such a great songwriter. And so he and I worked together a long time ago in our band, Two High String Band. And so we had many, many years of that together. And this is a song that we recorded on the Two High String Band's Hot Texas Bluegrass Burrito record, which is the record where me and Jeff and Brian had Eric Hokanen on fiddle and Mark Rubin from the Bad Livers on bass and Alan Mundy on banjo with us. It was a great record, but we recorded that song, and then a couple years later, Jeff put out a solo record that I produced, and we recorded that song on there. And then a few years later, I was playing with Wooden Wire, and a few years into playing with them, and we got booked to play at the festival that's in the town where the Whiskey Rebellion happened. And I should say, before that happened, after that song came out on Jeff's record, and before I started playing with Wooden Wire, Jeff and what ended up being all the guys from Wooden Wire had this bluegrass jam that they would do in Austin. Jeff and Trevor and then Dom and Tony came on the scene, and eventually that turned into Wooden Wire, so they knew the song from playing it with Jeff. And then when we got booked to play the thing, I told Tony, I told everybody, I asked Tony to learn if he wanted to learn it and the lyrics, and maybe we'd play it there. And anyway, long story, even longer. I also begged him not to mention it before we played it on stage, because I knew that nobody in the crowd had probably ever heard it. And so he didn't announce it, and we played it. And as they started to figure out what it was about, they started to react. It was awesome. It was really fun. And so
out beyond the hills in western Pennsylvania, good men support their families on whiskey from the grain. Ain't never had no money, ain't never had the need. Round and round the years we go, from harvest back to sea. But a cold wind is blowing and the taxman drawing near, and with him comes trouble to our way of life's so dear. Hamilton decreed it, and Washington each signed. Them folks back east don't give a damn about the frontier line. Here's to old Tom and all the tinker's men. Don't you pay that spirit tax, you'll still be short of men. You can follow me to Pittsburgh, follow me to jail. Your revenue man can follow me all the way to hell.
Yeah, that's how we started playing it, and we've been playing it ever since. The version that we ended up putting on the record, as far as the recording process goes, we had been working on a couple singles in late 2018 before we had our little Grammy nomination spike, and got too busy to keep recording for a while. We had started working on a couple singles to put out, and that was one of them. And then we got really busy for a while, and then we're just like, let's just start recording a record. And we tried to re-record that song, but could never get it the way we liked it, that we had recorded it originally, and that's for the single. So we used that version. So it kind of that track goes back a ways.
Home in the Banjo. You took out all the banjo players but one. Talk a little bit about that and the process in that song. It's an interesting story.
I wrote that song. We kind of I haven't always been a contributing songwriter to the band. When we were working on stuff and nobody else had anything to work on, we got into some of my material. And this is a song that is an example of how, it's been an interesting process, a really cool one that I love, which is writing a song and never intending to even share it. I mean, I don't really put out records of my songs. I've never gotten to that, I guess. But I write songs. I write a lot of songs, and usually have an idea in the pressure cooker or whatever. But the point being is that this was a new situation where I was in this band where the sort of opening was there, or the need for material, and so we got into my material well, and but I didn't want to sing it because I'm not like the singer in the band, and so then it turned into kind of like, okay, Tony trying some of these songs out, singing them, and he sings them all great, and it I mean it's kind of a fun thing. A lot of times you hear people cover other people's songs or whatever, but Tony to come in and start singing them before they're ever even recorded kind of makes this where we can kind of like tweak the songs a little bit to whatever, because like, for example, Home in the Banjo, when I originally wrote it, it was this just kind of funny song, not serious at all. This funny song I did, or could think of, and before I had even attached the chorus to it, and the chorus was something that existed in a different space, and then Tony, when we started working on it, it was like it was all of a sudden it was like so serious, and I don't know, it just had a different tone to it, different vibe to it, and we just kind of worked with it in a I don't know, I can only equate it to being like the writer on like a live, like Saturday Night Live or something, how you like work with the actors or whatever. So that's kind of how that song developed in that way, working with Tony and the band on the whole song was very kind of grew.
And then
Well, I don't know where I should be. Bluegrass is gone MP3. Old Tommy went AC/DC. And I don't know where I should be. I don't know where I can go. Where they're gonna have J.D. Crowe playing on the radio. I just don't know where I can go. I can't go home. Can't keep roaming. Can't keep loaning my days away. The old home is gone. Everything I love has turned the other way.
my hometown is an ode to El Paso.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's another song that I wrote that one many years ago. And again, just I had made a demo of it, but just really just for my own purposes.
My hometown goes along the river. My hometown is long and lean, 60 miles from east to west. Streets of dreams.
it was an ode to El Paso, but also talked about a lot of my some like personal stuff, and as Tony started singing it, I started to want to like make little changes on it, which we did, to make it even more sort of about El Paso and less about me. Just to kind of like, it's cool to be able to hone in, anything you're working on, whether it's a picnic table or a song. It's nice to be able to, go back and work on it more before you send it out the door, So that's how this song was. And yes, it mentions a lot of stuff about, it's all about El Paso, for sure. That's my hometown.
On earlier about John Hartford and on Can't Keep Up, kind of the banjo sound there. Paddle Wheels, you can't hear a song with that name without also being reminded of John Hartford a little bit. Just tell us a little bit about this song.
For sure. Trevor said when we were recording this, I'm going to give it my most Kermit-like banjo.
Standing on the boarding plank, paddle wheel rolling, my baby's just around the bend. It's been 2 long months of going up and down the river, and this boat's looking like an old friend. I can't wait to hit the ground running and take some time off, and then I'll find my way back like the flowing of the water, and I'll catch you so cold again.
Which is definitely that sound. I always associated those two sounds with my early banjo, hearing the banjo and hearing John Hartford play the banjo. So that song is one that Dom, with Bernard, a friend of his, who writes songs and lives in Nashville, used to be from Texas. He and Dom wrote the song Texas on our previous record. So Robin Bernard, I know that he's a John Hartford enthusiast, I would guess anyway, but he's a songwriter and just a good dude. But he also, that song is like a true story for him. It's something he worked on those boats and stuff. So it does have that, John Hartford skipping on the Mississippi Dude kind of all those steamboat records and songs and stuff feels to it for sure. So thank you.
And you close out the album with a great instrumental that you wrote, Clamp Shoot. Tell us a little bit. It was written as a tribute to Vassar Clements, who you played with. Tell us a little bit about what it was like playing with a legend like him.
Oh yeah, it was reassuring and invigorating and encouraging. I came to play with him by way of, some of the other people we were talking about, like Peter Rowan, and when I started playing with Peter Rowan in 1999, I did that for many years, and one of the gigs that we did for a lot of that time was the Rowan and Rice Quartet, and a lot of the gigs that were in sort of, I don't know, bigger budget gigs, I guess, they would put together a thing that was Rowan, Rice, and Clemens, and using the same band, and which I was the mandolinist for, and so in a lot of these situations where I played with Vassar, well, in every situation I played with Vassar was because I was playing with Peter, but it was getting to play with him in those situations. You know, it really made clear to me what you mentioned that Peter said earlier, which is, you know, this is the crowd that these guys brought this music to. You know what I mean? There's and you know, as a mandolinist and a fan and a listener, there's not, you know, it's overwhelming just in the sense of the amount of respect that I have in that way. You know, like being on stage with somebody who's the reacher, it's a crazy loop, but so cool and so nice and so encouraging and all those things I said earlier, that it just sets you at ease. And I mean, one night we were doing one of these shows, and it was at Town Hall in New York City, and, you know, sold out house, Peter, Tony, and Vassar show, and he sat back there in the dressing room with me and showed me Lonesome Fiddle Blues because I didn't know it, and he showed it to me note for note because we were going to play it that night. He just sat there with me for, you know, probably an hour or more, just showing, you know, nope, like this, nope, like this, nope, like this, and you know, just a patient, humble, kind, just, you know, it was amazing. so you know, there you go. There's
and for the
my reason for tribute right there.
And for the instrument geeks in the audience, tell us a little bit about the story behind the Gilchrist that you play on that song.
Oh yeah, okay. So I that's the Gilchrist. It was made for a fiddle player, and so it doesn't have any marks on it. But I got it through as these instrument stories go, you know, one hand to the next. But a banjo player who was playing in the group I was in, Two High String Band at the time, back in like 1996 or 97, I was about to leave Boston and move on and with the band and do some stuff, and the mandolin that I had was falling apart, and this guy that we had met down in Florida was playing banjo with us, and he was coming up to spend the last 6 weeks or so in Boston with us to do the work we had up there. And he knew my mandolin was falling apart. He had been up to see us and play some stuff, and he told my mom, well, his brother-in-law is this guy, Charlie Darrington, who's a super famous mandolin builder, fixer guy working for Gibson, and he's also in the mandolin orchestra in Nashville, and he's the guy who fixed Bill Monroe's mandolin after it was smashed to pieces in his cabin at one point. This mandolin that I have now was in his shop because it had just been in a studio fire in Nashville there, and it had some messed up finish and whatnot. And so it came to Charlie, and Charlie fixed it up, and Charlie's brother-in-law was the guy who was playing banjo in my band. So Gilchrist, those mandolins were sort of just starting to be very well known as this great mandolin, and that you have to wait a long time to get. And I mean, they had been known for a good while, but this was mid '90s, so they were coming on strong, and he needed to sell this mandolin, and David told my mom about it, who went and worked a deal out with Charlie and got it for not Gilchrist prices. And when David flew up to Boston to come finish out our gigs with us in Boston, he brought me this mandolin, and I had no idea it was coming. And it was it's a big daddy. Thanks, Mom. That was my college graduation present, and I didn't even graduate. What a sweetie. But anyway, that's that mandolin. Yeah, that's how I got it, and it's it's an amazing axe. I feel very fortunate to have it. And I've been lucky with a couple of the other mandolins I have that I haven't. I've received some good deals along the way. Thank goodness, because those instruments have certainly priced themselves out of what most people who play them can manage. Rest assured in that, because music will always rise back up from the ashes.